What's up, guys? Welcome back to Beardy Plays, and today it's going to be the first video in a series of how to make your own custom map in RustEdit. If you watched my last video, you would have seen how to make a procedurally generated map in RustEdit and all the steps involved that are involved in creating a Rust map. And I said I would go over each of those steps in more detail, one by one, in this series where I show you how to make a custom Rust map in RustEdit. So the first step in that series is going to be height maps. So height maps are basically the shape of your land, what it's going to look like from above, the peaks and valleys where your hills and stuff are, things like that. There's a bunch of ways you can get height map data, including making your own and stealing stuff that already exists. It's not really stealing it. A lot of it's free anyway. Or improvising. So I'm going to go over all the methods that I know and that I use for making height maps for my RustEdit maps. So the first way you could do it is you could just pop over to Google and you could find a height map that you want to use. There's a bunch here. Here's OpenGL. I don't know what that is. It might not even be a real place, but this is what they look like. They basically just look like a black and white photo from above of whatever landmass, right? And basically the way it works is you click on a page and it gives you spam, apparently. The way it works is black is sea level, black is the water, is the ocean, and the white is the highest point on the map. So that's going to be the top of the mountains is going to be the brightest part of the map, and the ocean is going to be the darkest part of the map. And the gradient in between, the black and white, or it could be colors too. Some height maps are colored. But the gradient in between dark to light is what's going to dictate the height of that space on the map. So from this data, it can build the shape of the island, and it can build the peaks and valleys and things like that. So this is one way you can come in here into Google, and you can search around, and you can find yourself a height map of something that you would like to make a Rust map out of. You can also come over to Transgram's GitHub.io, and they have a program that you can actually do a search on the world here, and I could say I want to make a Rust map out of whatever that is. So you just keep on zooming in, and because it's actual satellite data, the details just keep getting better and better, and you could, use a piece of this or all of it for a Rust map. You just got to remember that the biggest Rust map you can get is 6 kilometers square, so 6 by 6 kilometers, and you can't really translate even just this little island here, whatever it is. It's probably a lot bigger than any Rust map, right? So you wouldn't be able to just throw it in there and have it a 1-to-1 scale. You might have to do some smoothing and stuff after, right? So anyway, you can come in here and you can actually render out or save whatever height map data you want out of here. So an actual physical representation of anywhere on the world. You can zoom right in and find all the rivers and everything, right? So it's another option. And another option is, this is a program or a website called Photopea. It's basically a Photoshop ripoff. It's free, and that's why I use it. I wouldn't use it for anything that you're going to plan on making money off or selling, or that's going to be worth anything to you, anything copywritten or sensitive, because this is just a public website, and they obviously have no problem ripping off Photoshop, so who knows, right? So anyway, I use it because it's free and it's not really that important. And you could just create a new image. Rust maps are square. The area that they're built in are square, so you might as well use the square image. And of course, we're going to want to change the background black because the ocean is black. How come this is not weird? I hit OK and it changes back. That's strange. So we'll fill it with background black, represents the ocean, and then you could just grab a brush, make it brighter than the ocean, come in here and create your own landmass, right? I want my landmass to look like this. That's going to be my Rust map. And then you would fill in the rest of it. Probably not have a soft brush. You'd probably have a hard brush. And you come in here like that. And what's this going to do is basically just gives you the shape of the land, but it's not going to give you your peaks and your valleys and your hill and stuff, right? If you loaded this into RustEdit right now as a height map, it would open and it would give you basically just a big flat piece of land and no hills, no valleys, no peaks, no nothing. And I've done that before, and I still do that for map editing. Sometimes when you want full control, it's just easier to do it in the editor and look at it than it is to do it here. But you can also do some things to save some steps along the way. So we've made our landmass, and if you notice, I've used a feathered brush for these edges here. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us like a drop off into the beach. It's not just going to be like a sheer cliff drop into the beach. That's going to be a taper along actual beach into the ocean, and not just a quick drop off. So that helps a lot. In editing, you won't have to sit there and correct all this beach. So keep that in mind. You're going to want to feather all that. That's a good idea if you're making your own. And here you could add, another brush that's a little brighter. And I want to say add higher elevations. Like I want it to be make a bit smaller of a brush here. Not that small. And I want it to be a little bit higher. I'm going to have to turn my hardness back down. I want it a little bit higher elevation here, right? So that'll give you some hills there. They're going to be drastic in the editor. You would have to do a much finer gradient from light to dark if you wanted it to be, better. But you'll see what I mean. Just doing this will still give us something, right? There we go. I can smooth it out in the game and stuff, or in the editor. But you could do all that. A lot of that's easier to do in the editor itself. So basically, we could save this as a height map right now if we wanted. I will. Export as PNG, doesn't really matter. I will just call this, I don't know, fun1 PNG. And then the last thing that I like to do and do often is find something on Google in images that looks good and it looks like it would make a good island. Something like this skull here. This is just a piece of clip art I found on Google, and basically we can turn it into a height map. You could load it as a height map, not as is because the colors are wrong, but if you selected all of the skull itself, and then we'll fill it with the foreground. Foreground, yes, thank you. We'll make it all gray, and then we'll turn our background black. Edit, fill, black. I'm going over this quick, guys. This isn't a Photoshop tutorial. I'll leave you to edit your own files. I'm not even that great at Photoshop, so there's probably way better ways to do the things that I'm doing here, but basically you're going to want to have your ocean, which is black, and your land, which is, not black, in contrast. Now, I could just load this into RustEdit right now, and it would give me an island of this shape, but the shore is going to drop hard into the ocean, and there's not going to be any shoreline there or anything, right? Like I was saying before, So either you do this in game or you do it in the map, but you're gonna have to add something to this to basically smooth in the edge, or have some transition for the edges, and so you can have a beach. You'll see what I mean in a minute here. But another thing you can do is add texture to this map with filters. So if I wanted to not have this be flat, let me see, I'll select similar. I can just select all my land here, and I can go up to a filter. I'll change my colors, sorry. We're going to go from white, which is going to be the highest point, to, we'll say, 80%, 70%. Yeah, it sucks working using the this as a website. Sometimes it's like it's free, but it's glitchy. I hit OK and it goes back. No. So I'm basically just selecting my gradient here, right? I don't want all one gradient. Oh, did you just do it again? Okay, I'll just close it. All right, weird. Anyway, so I'm selecting a different gradient here, and I'm going to run a filter, which is on this program, it's called Fibers. You could probably find other filters in other programs, and actual Photoshop will have more filters and stuff like that, but that's just what I have access to right now. I'm not going to buy Photoshop or anything, or even spend much time, but this will give you texture into your land. You can see it gives you gradients from light to dark here. The light parts will be the highest points, and the dark parts will be the lowest points, of course, as we've gone over. And you can change some options, the variance. This is just going to be how, you know, how it varies. I guess the higher variance, the more peaks and valleys you're going to have, and the lower, because basically you're just adding texture to this image, right? So something like that looks pretty good. Then you can randomize it until it looks like something. There, we'll try with this. So that should give us some texture into our land. It's not just going to be flat now. We saved that one, which is going to be flat. We didn't give it any texture except for that little hill, and we'll open that up and I'll show you. But now we still have a problem with the beach here. So to fix that, I'm going to select similar, and then I'm going to select the inverse. So we got just the skull selected, and I'm going to stroke it, but I'm going to stroke at a lower. We ended at 70, so I'll put my stroke at 60. We'll say, if I can get it to dial there. So now if I stroke this edge at 60, that should be the lowest point. Excuse me. That should be the lowest point for our beach on the map. So as you can see, it put an outline around it, and that basically just gives us like a beach, flat beach that we can line the water line up to, and we can guarantee that we're always going to have a gradient dropping off into the water instead of just a sharp line. But that gives us a problem. As you can see, there's a dark line up against light lines in places here, and that means our beach line is going to be like choppy and hilly and stuff. We can smooth that out in game. It takes quite a bit. You can do most of it here with blur and give it a Gaussian blur or whatever, and you just slightly blur it so you can't really tell the outlines there, and it blends into. You don't want to blur so much that the image is gone, right? But you want to. That looks good there. Then we'll save this one and we'll load this one up. So I'll export this one as, say, Fun2. There we go. Now we'll go over to RustEdit and we'll load up some height maps. We can get to see what they look like here. So if I go create new, I want to make these big, say 5,500 to start with. The ground height, I'm not going to worry about. You can figure it all out if you do the math from the numbers and stuff like that, but it takes like a minute to correct it in the editor, so I'm not going to bother with this number. You guys can figure it out later if you want. If you use the same numbers in your image editing, you'll know what to change this number to. It's basically just where the sea level starts. But anyway, always go with recommended values. These will change when you change the map size, so make sure you go with the recommended values. Splat texture is just what you're going to be looking at when you edit. I like to look at grass, so it's the most pleasing to the mind, so grass for me. And biome is the same. It's just for when you're looking at it in the editor, so temperate, I like temperate. Height map is where we're going to select the images that we have here. So we'll select Fun1, the first one that we made. And then it's going to give us options for a minimum range, maximum range, and smoothing passes. So minimum range is always going to be 0. That's basically where your sea level starts, right? That's the black. And this is going to be the brightest white, right? So the brightest part of your image, how high do you want it to be? This is in meters. So we don't want the brightest part of our image to be 100 meters up in the sky. That's ridiculous. Or 1,000 meters up in the sky. That's ridiculous, right? The most I ever go on these is like 60, 70. We'll try like 60. We'll try 65. This is the image we made with the little with the brush with a little bit of what should be kind of like a mountain on the side, right? And smoothing is just the transition between the colors. Smoothing is like blending those transitions together. Instead of a sharp cliff, it'll smooth it down to a semi-sharp hill, right? It's still pretty steep, but it'll be like slanted instead of like a cliff. It'll be a hill kind of thing, right? So the more smoothing you do, the more it smooths it out, but it can only do so much. So with these things, I tend to crank up the smoothing out of the box just to see how it looks, and if it looks washed out, then I'll tune the smoothing down, but I generally start with a pretty high smoothing. And then we'll just create this, and it should show us what we created, that first map we created in Photopea there. And it should just be a big flat map with a hill on one corner, right? All right, so it successfully generated the image. It's going to load it up. I'm getting thirsty from talking. I should have brought something to drink. So when we first load it, it's going to be underwater. As you can see, it's down here. That's our land. But we're going to want to bring this above the water. First thing you're going to do is go over to our terrain tool, go to advanced options, and under add subtract height, you're just going to bring it up until it comes above the water line. It's pretty far down there. I'm going to move it up 200. It's probably going to be about 500. It needs to come up. Like I said, I could have set those numbers when we opened up this new height map, but it's easy enough to do it here. So I brought up 200. Still hasn't broke the water line. We'll bring it up another 200. Still haven't broke the water line. Got to be close. Yeah, it's right there. So I'll bring it up, say 50. Oh, I saw the water reflection change over there. It's got to be really close. Yeah. We'll bring it up 30. brought it up 480 so far, and that was almost perfect. So as you can see, the faded edge that we gave it in the editor leads in a nice slant into the water, right? And when we render this and the beaches show up, these will be nice beaches. These will be perfect beaches. They're a nice slant, slow slant into the water, and that's because we had a feathered brush when we drew that, and there was a good transition from the light to the dark, right? So that'll give us a good beach. Now let's go find where that hill is that we made. If I remember, it is right here. You can kind of see it on the map. I'll teleport over there. And there it is. Because I didn't make it that tall, and I smoothed it out pretty good. And if you're running around, you see how everything on the map is entirely flat, right? Just flatness everywhere. Excuse me. For miles. And the only hill around is that little one we made in the editor, right? And so all that work we did in the editor gives us this little hill. And because we smoothed it out to the maximum amount, it's got no ridges or anything, and it's just a nice gradual hill, right? So basically that's how you would do it with an image. We're going to load up that other one here. Let me see, the Fun 2, the skull. And we'll see what difference putting that texture in with the editor did. Well, actually, before we do that, I should show you what I normally do if I load up a flat map like this. Is I'll bring up my texture tools, and I'll say something with a good texture like this guy or this guy here, and I'll make it nice and big, bigger than that, way bigger than that, yeah. I'll bring up that guy, seeing the opacity and turn it down to something manageable, so I'm not laying out big stalactites. All right, and then I'll zoom out a bit, and I'll just texture the land. I'll go over it with this texture tool. As you can see, it's laying down texture here. And I've gotten a pretty low opacity because I don't want to, if you turn your opacity up too high, like 100%, you'll be laying down like big giant land spikes and stuff like that are hard to deal with. So you got to turn that opacity right down. I'll show you what I mean. If you left this up at 100 and you went to put something down, that's not land you can use. That's ridiculous, right? So you got to turn it down. I like, around 10, anywhere from 10 to 7 when you're doing fine work, right? And then it makes it much more reasonable. And basically, I'm not bringing the land up to make hills and stuff right now. Right now, I'm just putting texture down, right? I'm just putting texture over the whole map. So I'll just do it in this area here. I like to move around. If I move around, then the brush doesn't look the same. You can move the brush around by holding Control and clicking or rotating the mouse wheel up and down. We'll rotate the brush, but I like to rotate myself. So easier. And it looks better. So I textured up this land, but I didn't really make hills or anything here. There's just a land close here. I'll do this on the entire map. And if we go down now and look at the land from a first person's perspective, you can see it's got some texture now, right? It's got little peaks and valleys and hills and stuff like that, but it doesn't really have any giant hills or anything like that. It's just got texture, right? And you don't want to lay down giant, even this is a little too tall for the texture brush, because then it starts to get really tall peaks and valleys, which you don't really want as a player running around. That's like all these little mountains that you got to get over. That's rugged terrain, right? It's about as tall as I'd bring it with a texture brush. So then to make your hills, you just bring in a brush that has a good feathered edge to it. And the same thing, keep a low opacity, and make your hills with this brush instead after you've done your texture. So what that does is it brings the land up underneath your texture, and it'll stretch that texture out. Instead of making those bumps taller, it'll stretch them out in the growing of the hill. So it's a much less rugged terrain. Excuse me, much less ridiculous amount of peak and valley when you get down there in first person now. I don't have these big, giant, rugged hills. I just have the same slaloms that I've had everywhere on the map, but then just up a hill. Right. So that's basically how you would put in your terrain and peaks and valleys and your hills and stuff like that, and where you want it. Areas where you go to put stuff in later, you would do things like, say, flatten. I want to flatten this area to this height. If I hold down Control and hit right-click, it'll change the height here to whatever I'm clicking on, right? Let me change the size of my brush a little bit. There we go. So I'll right-click it, and I'll click it on a low spot here. So I'll right-click right there, and now I can flatten the whole area to that height, right? I know it looks garbage, it looks flat, or it looks stupid, or whatever, right? Well, you can pull in your smooth tool, turn your opacity back up, and just smooth out that edge. Now, you've got a flat spot in the middle of all your peaks and valleys that you can put your custom thing on, or have a custom build spot there, or whatever. When you're laying out prefabs, we'll get into that later, but when you're laying out prefabs, it does this for you, so you don't have to do this with your height map creation. But I'm just showing you how you can edit the land. So that's for flattening land. The raise lower can also be used to lower, so if you hold down Alt, let me turn my opacity down, of course. So say I'm making a hill here on this flat land. For whatever reason, I made it flat, and I want to make another hill here. I can put my hill up, right? And oh, I made that peak too high. I can hold down Alt, and then click on it, and it's going negative. Now that's the lower. If you hold down Alt, it switches to lower. So raise is just regular click, and hold down Alt click is lower. So you can, if there's areas that are too tall for you, like right here, I want to smooth that down and smooth that down. Okay, that looks better, right? Or you can let go of Alt and bring that land back up, right? So that's raise lower, flatten I showed you, smooth I showed you, bridge, you use them when you have two drastic big pieces of land. If you were, say, making your own continents and stuff like that, if you wanted to connect two pieces of land or two parts of the land, right? It would basically bridge the two, right? It would be like a smooth in between the 2 points or whatever. Almost never use. I've never used it, so you'll probably never use it either. But if you do, have fun. Clone, I also never used, but I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it clones the terrain that you're like. You can select the terrain you want to clone, and then when you put it down, it just copies whatever you cloned. Erode height does basically what it says is it erodes the height of wherever you are. So this is with the opacity really far down. As you can see, if I start clicking on something here with erode height, it's actually leaving the thing in the center of what I'm clicking. It's leaving that in the center. And everything around it, it's eroding the height down. So it's, eroding the height, basically. And then there's pinch height, which trying to find a place where it'll work here. Opacity needs to go up, I think. Yeah, pinch height. Well, I guess, I don't know. Maybe, because it was feathered. Amount. I don't know, man. Let me zoom out a bit here. Go for a smaller size. All right. So pinch height. Oh, see how it swirls? That's cool. I would never use this tool. I've obviously never used this tool, but yeah, that's don't know how to explain that, guys. I'm sure they have uses, but I've never used them. But either way, I use raise, lower, flatten, and smooth. Those are the only three I ever use. Use the brushes, and that's pretty much it for making your own custom height map. There we go. Get rid of that nonsense. And we're going to open up the skull now, and we're going to see what the textures did. Actually, got to do new, not open. On two, we're going to go all the recommended amounts here. Make sure they're the same. Grass, temperate. We're going to load it up with 65. Nah, we'll bring it up to about 70, maybe 80. And we'll still do 20 smoothing passes, but we'll see what kind of textured land this gives us. 80 is usually about as high as I go. So, and this is the skull that we did. It should have a tapered, flattened beach into the water. We didn't do a feathered edge in the editor, which you could do if you're better at Photoshop than I am, or more patient. You could have feathered the edge of the skull into the black, and it would have made a nice fade like our last map did. But I usually get away with this. So as you can see, the shape's under here, but I just gotta bring it up again. So we're going to do the same thing we did last time. I'm going to bring it up a couple hundred. And this one's probably going to be around, I don't know, I'll probably have to bring it up like 450 before I start to see the land. So that's 200. I didn't see it. I'll bring it up another 200. Should be getting close. Still don't see it. 50. We should start to see it now. There we go. And yeah, that's almost in the right spot. But as you can see, if we hit G, it gives us our map. There it is. Beautiful skull. And let's go see what kind of texture it gives us. Yeah, it gave us beautiful texture. It's nice rolling hills. It's not too close together. They're not too sharp. You know what I mean? They're nice and rolling and enough to hide bases behind and stuff. And of course we'll be making hills, right? We didn't do that in the editor like we did with the other one. So I'll be doing that here. The ground's already textured enough, so I won't have to add texture to the ground. That will save me a good step. You can see this taper into the beach that we've done here. Looks like I can go down. I'll go down two at a time until it looks good. Because we're going to want to be able to get a boat through all these teeth and stuff. They're supposed to be islands, not connected and stuff, right? We're getting there. Maybe another 2, maybe 4. Yeah, I'm starting to get there. I think one more. Yeah, it's just starting to look good. All right. So basically, we don't have to pay much attention if you can see the land doesn't just drop off suddenly now because we added that border around it and feathered it with the blur. It gradually runs off into the ocean, and you'll have places like here where you got, a lot of nice land underneath. It'll make a good beach, and you'll be able to build stuff out from the land onto the water instead of it just dropping right off into the ocean. So, which is still doing in some areas, but that's acceptable. There'll be cliffs along the water in some areas, right? So that's all totally acceptable. You can see we got some areas. The plugin we used for texturing wasn't perfect, so we got some areas where those will end up being lakes if we do nothing about them, but I'm going to be adding hills here, so a lot of those will probably be gone. You can hit G and you can see them on the map usually, like right here is the ones we were looking at. They're not egregious, so you could leave them if you want little lakes here and there, or you can, bring up the terrain a bit when you're putting the hills in. I'll probably do a combination of both because I like leaving lakes in little areas, right? So, either way, guys, I'm going to keep fiddling around with this map here. I'm going to build up the hills and stuff like that. I already showed you how I did that, right? Add a little texture here and there, and I'll build up some hills and stuff like that. And I'll get it ready for the next stage, which I believe is biomes, is it? Let's see. Procedural tools, native, custom. You could actually make this into a map right now if you just deselected the height map and ran it. It would create procedurally generated map on top of your custom height map. Still not a fully custom map, but getting a step closer, right? So keep that in mind, too. If sometimes all you want is the shape of the island, well, there you go. So the next one's going to be biome. Biome's going to go pretty quick, so we're probably going to do topology and splat maybe at the same time. They're all pretty quick, and they're not as involved as height map. So anyway, guys, if you got any questions, comments, any ideas on how to get better height maps or how to make better height maps and stuff like that, free tools and all that kind of stuff, let me know because always looking for stuff like that. All right, guys. Later.